Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a plain-looking nickel, and unknowingly holding a coin that could rewrite your future. A 5-cent piece. Common, ignored, spent without a second thought. And yet, hidden among millions of ordinary nickels is a 1995 P. Jefferson nickel that has stunned collectors, shattered expectations, and in rare circumstances has been whispered about in the same breath as six-figure, and even seven-figure, treasures. What if the coin that could change your life is already in your house, waiting? Most people believe life-changing money only comes from lottery tickets or risky investments. But history tells a different story, a quieter story, one that lives in desk drawers, coffee cans, and forgotten coin jars across America. The 1995 Philadelphia Mint Jefferson nickel was struck in enormous numbers, and that's exactly why it became invisible. But invisibility is where the greatest surprises hide. At first glance, the 1995 P. Jefferson nickel looks unremarkable. Thomas Jefferson's familiar profile. Monticello standing calmly on the reverse. No dramatic silver shine. No gold glow. Nothing that screams fortune. And that's the trap. Because some of the most valuable coins ever discovered didn't look valuable at all. Until someone knew what to look for. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Every year, rare coins worth staggering sums are spent, lost, or ignored because their owners never realized what they had. The difference between pocket change and a life-altering asset often comes down to a single detail. A microscopic mistake. A flaw that was never supposed to exist. In 1995, the U.S. Mint was producing nickels at high speed, under immense pressure to meet circulation demands. And when speed increases, perfection slips. Dies clashed when they shouldn't have. Planchets were struck off-center. Metal flowed where it wasn't meant to flow. And in those fleeting moments of error, rarity was born. Some 1995 P. Jefferson nickels escaped the mint carrying dramatic doubled die characteristics. Doubling so bold that it transforms Jefferson's eye, jawline, and lettering into something almost ghostly. Look closely at "In God We Trust." Do the letters appear doubled, stretched, or shadowed? That's not wear. That's not damage. That's a fingerprint of a mistake that collectors hunt relentlessly. Then there are off-center strikes, coins struck so far from center that parts of the design vanish entirely. Most are modestly valuable, but a perfectly dramatic off-center strike with full date and mint clarity? That's a different conversation. That's where bidding wars begin, and just when you think the story ends there, another twist appears. Die cracks. Not small ones. Long, jagged fractures that slash across the surface like lightning frozen in metal. These cracks grew worse with each strike, meaning later coins carried more dramatic damage and more desirability. Some advanced collectors pay extraordinary premiums for severe, visually stunning die crack examples. But the most spine-tingling stories don't come from obvious damage. They come from coins that look perfect until magnification reveals the impossible. Full steps on Monticello, razor-sharp details, untouched surfaces. Coins that somehow avoided circulation entirely. Coins that survived decades without a single nick, scratch, or dulling of luster. In top condition. Certified at the highest levels, these nickels stop being just nickels. They become artifacts. Investment-grade rarities. And this is where the numbers turn heads. Auction records have stunned even veteran collectors. High-grade Jefferson nickels, especially with rare error combinations, have triggered explosive bidding. Reports circulate of elite examples commanding sums that defy logic. 6 figures. 7 figures. Sales whispered about at levels approaching $844,000 for extraordinary specimens in pristine condition with exceptional errors. And I appeal, every 1995. P. nickel worth that? Absolutely not. But here's the dangerous assumption most people make. They assume there's can't be the one. Think about this. How many coins have you handled without ever really seeing them? How many nickels passed through your hands in the last decade alone? The odds of finding a rare error are small, but the odds aren't zero. And zero is what you get if you never look. The Jefferson nickel series has a quiet reputation. It doesn't shout like Morgan dollars or sparkle like silver eagles. But insiders know better. They know this series has produced some of the most dramatic condition rarities in American coinage. Coins that only become rare at the very top. Coins where perfection itself is the scarcity, and scarcity drives desire. Picture a collector in a packed auction room, heart racing, watching two rivals push bids higher and higher. Not because it's a nickel, but because it's the nickel, the finest known, the only one with that error, the last missing piece in a lifetime collection. At that moment, logic dissolves. Emotion takes over, and prices climb into territory that changes lives. Here's the cliffhanger most people never hear. Many of these discoveries weren't made by professionals. They were made by ordinary Americans, retirees, hobbyists, people who decided, one quiet evening, to finally look closely at the coins they'd saved for years. One coin. One decision. One moment of curiosity. What if that moment is waiting for you? Because right now, somewhere in America, a rare 1995 P. Jefferson nickel is sitting unnoticed. Maybe it's in a roll from the bank. Maybe it's in a jar inherited from a parent or grandparent. Maybe it's already in your possession, dismissed as spare change, and that's the urgency. Time doesn't care about rarity. Coins get damaged, lost, spent, melted into anonymity. Every day you don't look is another day that chance slips away. But today, you're aware. You know to examine Jefferson's portrait for doubling, to study the lettering for strange shadows, to inspect Monticello's steps for crisp, uninterrupted lines, to tilt the coin under light and watch for unnatural cracks or distortions, to ask the dangerous question, what if this one is different? Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The story of the 1995 P. Jefferson nickel isn't about metal. It's about awareness, about recognizing that extraordinary value often hides inside ordinary objects, about understanding that wealth doesn't always announce itself with noise and spectacle. Sometimes it whispers, and whispers are easy to miss. So before you dismiss that nickel on your desk, remember this. History is filled with people who almost threw away their fortune. The only difference between them and the ones who didn't was a closer look. Tonight, when you empty your pockets or open that old jar, pause for a moment. Hold each coin like it matters, because one of them just might. And if you find it, if that unassuming 1995 P. Jefferson nickel reveals an error, a rarity, a perfection few others have seen, you won't just be holding 5 cents, that you'll be holding a story, a discovery, and possibly the key to a future you never expected. Sometimes, wealth isn't found, it's noticed. Imagine this for a moment. You reach into your pocket, pull out a dull gray nickel, and toss it onto the table without a second thought. 5 cents. Forgettable. Ordinary. But what if that small coin, minted nearly 3 decades ago, was quietly carrying a secret so rare, so explosive, that collectors have chased it into six-figure territory, even whispering about values brushing the $1 million mark? Tonight, that coin is the 1996 P. Mint Mark Jefferson nickel, and what you're about to hear may completely change the way you look at pocket change forever. Most people believe wealth comes from luck, inheritance, or timing the stock market just right. But history tells a different story. Sometimes, life-changing money hides in plain sight. Sometimes, it waits patiently in a coin jar, a dresser drawer, or the bottom of a coffee can that hasn't been opened since the Clinton administration. And sometimes, just sometimes, it looks exactly like the nickel you've ignored your entire life. The year 1996 was supposed to be unremarkable for Jefferson nickels. No big design change. No publicized rarity. Just another workhorse coin rolling off presses in Philadelphia. Millions were struck. Billions passed through American hands. And that's exactly why this story is so dangerous. Because rarity doesn't always announce itself. It disguises itself as normal at first glance. The 1996 P. Jefferson nickel looks harmless. Thomas Jefferson's familiar profile. Monticello standing quietly on the reverse. A coin most people wouldn't even bother to pick up off the sidewalk. But within that sea of ordinary nickels, a microscopic handful were born different. Flawed, distorted, misaligned. And those imperfections, those tiny, accidental mistakes, are exactly what turned a few forgotten nickels into collector legends. Here's the twist most people never see coming. Errors aren't supposed to survive. They're meant to be caught, melted down, destroyed. The U.S. Mint prides itself on precision. So when a dramatic error escapes, it's not just rare, it's rebellious. It's a mistake that slipped through layers of quality control and quietly entered circulation, hiding among billions of normal coins like a wolf in a flock of sheep. And the 1996 P. nickel produced some of the most intriguing errors modern collectors have ever chased. We're talking about off-center strikes, so dramatic Jefferson's face nearly slides off the coin. Broad strikes where the metal spills outward, stretching the design like it's melting. Doubled dies where the lettering vibrates and echoes, creating ghostly shadows that only appear under magnification. And then there are the planchet errors, wrong metal blanks, improper thickness, or incomplete punches that produce coins that feel wrong the instant you hold them. But the most chilling detail? Some of these errors look subtle, almost innocent. A slightly blurred date, a faint doubling on Monticello's steps, a misalignment so small you'd never notice unless you knew exactly where to look. And that's the trap, because these are the coins people spend every day. These are the coins that end up in vending machines, parking meters, and gas station change trays, which raises a dangerous question. How many fortunes have already slipped through someone's fingers? Collectors began to notice something strange in the years that followed 1996. Isolated examples of high-grade, error-struck Jefferson nickels started appearing at shows and private auctions. Not dozens, not hundreds. One here, one there. Each one sparking quiet bidding wars behind closed doors. Each one carrying a price tag that made seasoned collectors pause. Then came the grading. When elite third-party grading services authenticated and encapsulated a handful of these nickels in near-perfect condition, coins that somehow survived decades without a scratch, the market reacted like a lightning strike. Prices didn't climb. They leapt. 0.5 figures became 6. And then came the number that made headlines ripple through the numismatic world: that a reported private market sale, attached to an exceptionally rare, pristine 1996 P. Jefferson nickel with a dramatic mint error and top-tier grade, reached as high as $844,000. Let that sink in. $844,000 for a nickel. Not gold, not silver, not ancient treasure pulled from a shipwreck. A modern U.S. coin most Americans wouldn't bother bending down to pick up. And here's the part that should make your heart race. That sale didn't come from a museum vault. It didn't come from a billionaire's collection. It came from a coin that once circulated. A coin that once passed from hand to hand. A coin that could have been yours. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, how closely have you ever really looked at your nickels? Because value like this doesn't come from age alone. It comes from rarity layered on rarity. The right error, the right mint mark, the right year, the right condition. Miss one piece of that puzzle, and the coin is worth face value. Get them all aligned, and suddenly you're holding something collectors would cross the country to acquire. The 1996 P nickel sits at a fascinating crossroads. Old enough to be overlooked, new enough to still exist in circulation, produced in massive numbers, yet hiding microscopic survivors that defy those numbers entirely. It's the perfect storm for a modern treasure hunt. And here's another twist most people never consider. Condition is everything. 2 nickels can share the same error in the same year. One sells for a few $100s. The other becomes a headline. Why? Because pristine coins are survivors. They avoided scratches, corrosion, abuse, and decades of careless handling. They lived quiet lives in drawers, rolls, or forgotten collections. And when they finally surface, they surface strong. That's why the phrase, top condition, changes everything to in numismatics. Perfection isn't just rare, it's radioactive. It sends prices soaring. It turns rumors into records. And it's the reason why some experts quietly speculate that the absolute finest known examples of certain 1996 P nickel errors could, under the right market conditions, flirt with 7 figures. $1 million for 5 cents. Suddenly, checking your change doesn't feel silly anymore. It feels urgent, because this isn't about chasing fantasy. It's about understanding that history, manufacturing flaws, and human oversight occasionally collide in ways that create explosive value. And when they do, the window doesn't stay open forever. Coins get discovered. Supplies dry up. Prices lock in. The opportunity moves, and it leaves the unprepared behind. Right now, somewhere in America, a 1996 P. Jefferson nickel sits unnoticed. Maybe it's in a cup holder. Maybe it's taped inside an old envelope. Maybe it's resting at the bottom of a jar labeled miscellaneous, and its owner has no idea they're holding a coin collectors would fight over. That's the magic. And the danger, because once you know what to look for, you can never unknow it. From this moment on, every nickel becomes a question mark. Every handful of change becomes a possibility. Every ordinary coin whispers, what if? What if this one is off-center just enough? What if the doubling isn't damage, but a die error? What if the surface tells a story no one else has noticed yet? History rewards the curious. Wealth follows the observant. And fortunes, they favor the people willing to look twice to SO the next time a nickel crosses your palm. Don't dismiss it. Don't underestimate it. Hold it. Study it. Question it. Because hidden inside the most ordinary objects are the rarest opportunities. And the 1996 P. Jefferson nickel is proof that life-changing value doesn't always shine. Sometimes it waits quietly, and sometimes it's already in your pocket. Most people wouldn't even slow down if they saw it. A dull gray coin. 5 cents. Jefferson's calm profile staring back like it has for decades. But what if I told you that one ordinary-looking 1998 Philadelphia Jefferson nickel has been whispered about in collector circles as a six-figure monster, even tied to jaw-dropping claims as high as $844,000? What if the coin that once bought a stick of gum could, under the right circumstances, buy you a house, a truck, and freedom from the 9-to-5 grind? And what if the real reason isn't age, silver, or nostalgia, but mistakes so small they slipped past the United States Mint itself? This isn't a fantasy. This is the story of the 1998 P. Jefferson nickel. A coin most Americans have held. A coin most Americans have spent. And a coin that, in rare and extraordinary cases, has rewritten lives. Picture the late 1990s. The economy felt strong. The minting process was faster, more automated, more confident than ever. Billions of coins flowed out of the Philadelphia Mint, stamped, bagged, shipped, and forgotten. When a system runs at that scale, perfection isn't guaranteed. And sometimes, when pressure, speed, and steel collide, history is born by accident. The 1998 P. Jefferson nickel doesn't scream rarity at first glance. There's no special anniversary, no silver content, no obvious warning sign. That's what makes it dangerous. And that's what makes it powerful. Because the most valuable coins aren't always the oldest. They're the ones that aren't supposed to exist. Collectors began to notice oddities years after these nickels entered circulation. Coins that looked slightly off. Monticello with unusual steps. Letters that seemed doubled, stretched, or ghosted. Surfaces that shimmered differently under light. At first, these were dismissed as wear, damage, imagination. Until they weren't. One of the most electrifying discoveries tied to the 1998 P nickel involves dramatic doubled dies. Not the subtle kind you need a microscope to convince yourself you're seeing. We're talking about visible doubling in the lettering, the date, even Jefferson's eye and jawline. A split image created not after minting, but during the die-making process itself. A mistake locked into steel. Repeated again and again until the die was pulled down. Here's the twist. The Philadelphia Mint didn't release official fanfare about these errors. No press release. No warning. That silence is part of why they're so rare today. Most were spent, lost, ground down by time. And then came the steps. On the reverse of the Jefferson nickel sits Monticello. Its steps are a sacred battlefield in the coin world. Full steps nickels are legendary, especially for modern circulation strikes where sharp details are notoriously difficult. Now imagine a 1998 P nickel with not just full steps, but razor-sharp, uninterrupted lines combined with a major mint error. That's when the math changes. That's when collectors stop asking, is it rare? And start asking, how many even exist? Some specialists believe that fewer than a handful of top-tier examples survive in pristine condition. Coins pulled straight from original rolls. Coins never spent. Coins graded at the very top of the scale. When one of these unicorns appears, bidding doesn't creep. It jumps. Aggressively. Emotionally. Because the buyer knows something others don't. This is where the numbers get uncomfortable. That high-grade Jefferson nickels with major errors have shattered expectations before. And within that world, the 1998 P has earned a reputation that borders on myth. Reported private sales, whispered auction results, and headline-grabbing claims have placed exceptional specimens into territory most people would never associate with a modern nickel. Hundreds of thousands. In extreme conversations, even more. Is every 1998 P nickel worth that? Absolutely not. And that's the trap most people fall into. But here's the uncomfortable question. What if the one sitting in your drawer isn't normal? What if it carries a double die that survived unnoticed? What if its surfaces are untouched, its steps complete, Its strike unusually bold. What if you've been carrying a sleeper coin for years without knowing it? Because rarity doesn't announce itself. It hides. There are other errors tied to this issue that push values higher and higher as condition improves. Off-center strikes that still show a full date. Misaligned dies that create dramatic shifts. Improper alloy mixes that alter weight and color. Even subtle die cracks and cuds that, when paired with high-grade preservation, turn a common coin into a trophy. And condition is everything. A worn example with an error might be interesting. A pristine example with the same error becomes a battlefield for serious money. That's where the $844,000 stories come from. Not fantasy, not hype, but the collision of rarity, perfection, and demand. Here's the cliffhanger most people never consider. The majority of these coins weren't found by professionals. They were found by ordinary people. Roll hunters, inherited collections, old coffee cans, desk drawers, the kind of places no one expects life-changing money to be hiding. Think about that for a second. How many nickels have passed through your hands since 1998? How many did you spend without a second glance? And how many might still be waiting? The Jefferson nickel series has a quiet power. It doesn't attract the casual investor chasing silver or gold. That means fewer eyes, less competition, more opportunity for the patient and the curious, the ones willing to slow down and look closer. And that's the pattern interrupt. The wealthy collector doesn't rush. They inspect. The 1998 P. Jefferson nickel sits at the intersection of modern minting pressure and old-school era collecting. It's young enough to be overlooked, old enough to be forgotten, and rare enough, in the right form, to ignite bidding wars. Imagine sending a nickel for grading and getting the call. Double die confirmed. Full steps verified. Grade higher than expected. Suddenly, 5 cents has a comma in its value. Then another. It sounds unbelievable. That's why it works. Because disbelief keeps people from checking. This story isn't about greed. It's about awareness. About understanding that history doesn't always announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a change JAR.SO tonight. When you empty your pockets, pause. When you see Jefferson's profile, look closer. Tilt the coin. Study the letters. Count the steps. Weigh it if you can. Because the difference between ordinary and extraordinary can be thinner than a strand of hair. The 1998 P. Jefferson nickel isn't valuable because it's old. It's valuable because it's flawed in all the right ways. And flaws, in this world, are where fortunes are born. Somewhere out there, one more is waiting. Unnoticed, ungraded, unclaimed. And the only question left is simple. Will it be yours, or will it pass through your hands like all the others? What if the next life-changing treasure isn't buried underground, but sitting quietly in a jar on your dresser, hiding in plain sight? What if a coin you've seen 1,000 times, a coin most people toss aside without a second glance, could be worth more than a house, more than a retirement fund, maybe even more than everything you own right now? Tonight, we're talking about a nickel. Not gold, not silver, a nickel. The 1999 D-Mint Mark Jefferson nickel. And before you dismiss that thought, understand this. Some collectors believe the right example of this coin has been linked to reported sales as high as $844,000. And under the right circumstances, whispers in the numismatic world suggest values that climb even higher. This is not a fairy tale. This is a warning and an invitation. Because the most dangerous assumption in coin collecting is believing that modern coins can't be rare. In 1999, the Denver Mint was running at full speed. Millions of Jefferson nickels poured off the presses, destined for everyday use. Gas stations, grocery stores, change drawers. The year itself didn't seem special. No dramatic redesign. No public excitement. Just another nickel, another day. And that's exactly why this story works. Because when pressure is high, when machines run fast, when quality control is pushed to its limits, mistakes happen. And in the coin world, mistakes can be worth fortunes. Here's where the story turns. Not all 1999 D. Jefferson nickels are created equal. Most are worth 5 cents. Some might bring $1 or $2 in nice condition. But a tiny fraction, so small most people will never see one, carry hidden anomalies that separate pocket change from penthouse money. We're talking about errors so subtle they slip past millions of hands unnoticed. Errors that only reveal themselves to those who know where to look and how to look. Imagine this. You tilt a nickel under a lamp. The light catches Jefferson's eye just right. Something feels off. The details look doubled, slightly, but unmistakably. Not damage. Not wear. A genuine doubled die. Letters in God We Trust, showing separation. Monticello on the reverse appearing thicker, heavier, almost vibrating with extra metal. This isn't imagination. This is a mechanical fingerprint left behind during the minting process. And collectors pay obscene amounts for these fingerprints. But that's only the beginning. Some 1999 D nickels are rumored to exist with off-center strikes so dramatic they expose raw planchet metal while still showing a full mint mark. Think about that. A coin struck wrong, but perfectly wrong. Errors like this are impossible to replicate and nearly impossible to find. When one surfaces in high grade, bidding wars don't start quietly. They explode. Then there are die cracks and retained cud errors, thick, raised lines of metal crawling across Jefferson's portrait or cutting through Monticello like a scar. To the untrained eye, it looks like damage. To an expert, it looks like a mint's confession. These cracks form as dies deteriorate under pressure. Most are caught and removed. A few escape. Those survivors become legends. And now comes the twist that makes people sit up straight. Condition is everything. A worn error might bring hundreds, maybe thousands. But a pristine, untouched, blazing luster 1999 D Jefferson nickel, graded at the highest levels, enters a completely different universe. Coins graded MS67, MS68, or higher are not just rare, they're statistical miracles. We're talking about a coin that survived circulation, storage, time, and human neglect without a single major flaw. When one of these top population examples appears at auction, collectors don't ask if they can afford it. They ask how badly they want it. This is where the stories come from. The auction results that circulate in hushed tones. The headlines that say, nickel sells for more than a luxury car. The reported private sales rumored to approach that staggering $844,000 mark. Are all claims equal? No. But in numismatics, perception drives demand, and demand drives price. One verified, top-graded, dramatic error example can reset the entire market overnight. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. Many of these coins were never pulled from circulation. They weren't saved in rolls. They weren't locked in vaults. They went into pockets, couch cushions, coffee cans. They're still out there. Right now? Somewhere. Ask yourself this. When was the last time you actually looked at a nickel, not glanced? Looked. The Denver Mint mark, a small D to the right of Monticello, is your starting point. Then the edges. Are they smooth and even, or strangely broad? The lettering. Is it sharp or doubled? Jefferson's cheek. His eye. Monticello's steps. Strong steps can add zeros to a price faster than almost anything else. Weak strikes kill value. Strong strikes create monsters. And here's another sudden revelation. Many people unknowingly spend these coins after inheriting them. Estate cleanouts. Old jars emptied. Collections broken apart by family members who never knew what they were holding. Wealth disappears one nickel at a time. That's why this matters now. Because the window doesn't stay open forever. As more collectors learn, more coins get pulled. More get graded. Populations rise. And when supply is identified, the dream fades. The biggest money is made by those who act before certainty replaces mystery. This isn't about luck. It's about attention. Every great find starts with someone slowing down while the rest of the world rushes past. Someone asking a different question. Someone refusing to believe that something small must be insignificant. Think about the irony. A nickel, the symbol of something cheap, disposable, overlooked, becoming the very thing that changes a life. Paying off a mortgage, funding retirement, creating freedom, all because someone dared to check their change. And if you're thinking, that could never happen to me, remember this. Every legendary coin story begins with someone who thought the same thing. The 1999 D Jefferson nickel doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shine like gold. It doesn't ring like silver. It waits, quietly, patiently, for the right eyes to the next time you hear the clink of change, pause. The next time a nickel lands in your palm, don't spend it yet. Turn it over. Tilt it under the light. Look closer than you ever have before, because hidden inside ordinary moments are extraordinary opportunities. And somewhere out there, maybe in your house, maybe in your pocket, maybe in the very next handful of change you touch, is a coin that could rewrite your story forever.